Thank you for listening to the Rock Guitar Confidential podcast with Ryan and Scott. Please make sure to rate and subscribe to this podcast. Today's topic, underrated and overrated guitar players. You're going to be probably pretty pissed off on this one.
All right, welcome back to the Rock Guitar Confidential podcast with Scott and Ryan. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Scott. Thank you so much for listening.
All right, so today's topic, underrated and overrated guitar players.
Yes, this is always going to be kind of spicy. People are going to get a little cranky about some things we say probably. Listen, to make it to the level of a musician that everybody knows who you are, there's something to be said for that, no matter what Ryan and I might think about these specific players necessarily. So there's respect given, just implied, because to even know these guys' names, there has to be a certain something.
Yep.
But let's start off with the negativity.
Well, I think we agreed on a certain format, and that would be for every overrated guitar player, we have to contribute two underrated guitar players.
Oh, that's so easy. I have so many underrated guys.
I know you do. So here, I'll start with the first overrated guitar player. Just to get it out of the way, we're just going to rip the Band-Aid off. The Edge from U2.
Yeah, this is actually funny because Brian and I don't actually totally agree on the Edge. Because I do appreciate the Edge for what he does.
I just said overrated.
Okay, that's true.
I'm cool with the Edge. If I went to a U2 concert, it would be awesome.
Yep.
It really would be. And they've good songs, and he knows how to play. However,
yes,
he's still on an echelon. When there's a documentary called, It Could Get Loud.
Yeah. And
I'm like, oh, Jimmy Page, rad. Oh, wait, why is the Edge here?
Yeah, exactly. Because people know who the Edge is, I think is why that is. He's famous,
Right. And again, I've already been explicit in a previous podcast that, I'm not a Jack White hater.
Now, it's funny. I kind of am.
I understand, and I respect that.
That's so funny how that works. But no, I agree with you. I think the Edge. No, I think if I just can try and turn back to what I'm hearing you say, I feel like what you're saying is the level of fame and sort of accolades that the Edge has acquired seems too much for what he was presenting. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I do believe you could replace the Edge.
Oh yeah.
I do believe that if the Edge quit, then U2 could carry on as the same band, writing the same songs with the same sound.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
I don't think, someone else can use a delay pedal, right? Any musician who can count,
that's true,
can use a delay pedal.
It's true.
It's true.
I agree. I think the stuff he plays on those records is pretty cool, and that definitely adds to the vibe of the song.
It serves the song. I get it. Yep. However, again, you could replace him.
Totally.
You could call Steve Lukather in a heartbeat, and hey, maybe Lukather gets on our underrated players.
That's true. Well, dude, he definitely is on mine for sure.
Yeah, totally, man. You could call Steve Lukather and plug him into U2, and he could not only play all the songs for every gig, he could write the next two albums.
Yeah.
And they would sound like U2 albums, no problem.
I wonder how much of the Edge's fitting in with U2 is his lack of ability in a lot of ways. I think sometimes if you have a smaller box to choose from, you're going to choose things that tend to be more song-oriented, whereas if you're a more rounded player, you might be wanting. And I look at someone like Steve Lukather, and I think the guy is so great. Maybe he would try and add way too much to it. It would kind of ruin the sauce that makes U2 what they are. If you have someone who only knows a couple of things, maybe that's exactly what's right for that band.
Well, I think Lukather is unique because he's such a prolific session guy. He's built a career out of being able to fit into someone else's project.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right?
I don't think for a second that Luke couldn't do it. I'm sure he could. He'd do great at it. But I wonder, if there's something to the limited options being something that makes him work so well for that band. You know what I mean? It's weird.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. And you don't want, I'm sure Bono doesn't want to be outshined by his guitar player.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
It's he's probably not looking for a Page Plant situation or a Eddie Dave kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Totally, man. Yeah, so that could definitely, yes.
So the Edge makes your number one most overrated guitar player?
Well, at least for today.
Okay. Well, let me do an overrated, and then we'll do a few underrated.
Okay, we promised it would be like one, but I guess we went 1 for 1 with Luke.
We'll do one. Yeah, well, Luke is probably, I think, just to get that out of the way, he's probably the most underrated guitar player in music history. Because even if you don't think you've heard Steve Lukather, you definitely have heard Steve Lukather.
I'd put Tommy Tedesco.
Yes. Well, everyone's heard Tommy's stuff too.
Yep, and dude, I bet like any non-guitar person, I guess that person wouldn't be listening to this podcast, but they wouldn't know who he was.
But Steve Lukather is the guy who's, not only is he like the most prolific session guy of his time, he also was in the massive band that had major hits on their own. You know what I mean? Toto had multiple platinum albums, multiple top 10 hits, big tours, arenas, and stadiums all over the world. There's not a lot of session guys who have that on their resume, that they were not only one of the most prolific session guys of all time, but also had a band with monster hits. There's still monster hits today.
Yeah, dude, hold the line, man. And
Africa,
you know what?
Rosanna. I mean, those tunes are on the radio now.
Oh, Rosanna's so good.
Those songs are on the radio and have been consistently for 45 years. I mean, and they're going to be for another 45 years. He's unique. He kind of stands alone amongst that group of session guys, because there's really no other session guy who had that kind of career as a session player, as well as a monster career with his own band too. That just doesn't happen. The closest I can think of is maybe a guy like Dan Huff, but that was only for a brief window in like the early 90s. Yeah. You know what I mean? He didn't have the staying power like Luke had. So, okay, by the way, that's probably going to be one of my underrated guys later.
Dan Huff, okay, great.
Yeah. But like as far as the other overrated guy, to me, and this is something that I actually respect this guy's playing a lot, but I think Kirk Hammett is probably one of the most overrated guitar players. Mainly because if I compare him to a band like his contemporaries, like in Megadeth, it's not even close who had the better guitar players. I think Mustaine's a better player.
Dude, I think Danny Spitz from Anthrax is a better guitar player.
I agree.
Yeah, if you're gonna go big four.
And I think that if you look at that, I mean, obviously Alex Skolnick from Testament, way better guitar player.
Well, then you're getting into like second generation of thrash.
But even then, like there's so many guys in that genre who are much better. And every guitar player who's ever played in Megadeth is way better than Kirk Hammett. And it's not even arguable.
Like you have to be to get that gig.
Yeah, exactly. So
Kirk Hammett strikes me as a guy who I'd love to hang out with and talk about horror movies with. Yeah. Like Kirk Hammett's a quote guitar hero who I would love to hang out with, and like I would probably never talk to him about guitar stuff.
Well, I have to say,
I'd still really like to hang out with him.
He does seem like a good dude. For sure.
Way good dude.
But I think that, and I would say this, that I think his solos, particularly on Ride the Lightning and really up through And Justice for All, were good. They were decent. I think at that time he did the best he could.
Yeah, well, they fit there's definitely an argument that, maybe Kirk is bored with. He's already explored everything that he can do within the confines of Metallica. Mm-hmm. So I hear he has a new solo album out, and I'm told it's good. I'll check it out, man. I have a deep and abiding love for horror movies, and so hey.
What's funny too is I think that the overrated. It's not that we think that they're bad musicians or bad players. It's just that the amount of adulation poured upon them is kind of not really. In line with what their actual skill is. I look at someone like Marty Friedman, who's not even
skill or talent.
Yeah, not even remotely as famous as Kirk Hammett, or Chris Broderick, or you name it, Chris Poland. Those guys like that, Alex Skolnick. Mm-hmm. Those guys are not having the success in terms of fame and money that Kirk Hammett has. And that's kind of what we're saying. It's not so much an indictment on how bad he is or something like that.
Now, and dude, you mentioned Marty Friedman, man. Mm-hmm. Talk about the total package of having your own voice, also being, actually even having your own technique. I mean, his picking style is totally unorthodox. Yeah. Just everything about the guy is totally bespoke.
How about you stand on stage next to in his prime Jason Becker and not be shy? That takes some balls right there.
Yeah, man.
You know what I mean? That's a dude who's
balls or ovaries.
That's true. Yeah. But basically, we're not going to be sexist on that. But
I'm just making sure.
It's true. Ovaries are good too.
Yep.
But I mean, if you look at that, how much that must take to stand on stage next to Jason Becker in his prime.
Yeah. Well, you know what's cool? I mean, those guys were like, childhood friends, or like once like the Mike Varney like stuff. Like there's the stories of them like going in the backyard with the metronome. I wish I could have been in that backyard when
totally.
Dude, Jason
like
and Marty,
peanut butter and jelly, man. Those guys are just right there.
Yeah, dude, just like turn tick, and then just hear him go for it.
The fact that
so great.
Cacophony existed is something that makes me happy inside. Knowing that there's a time where there was these two 18, 19-year-old dudes who were just trying to be the best guitar players they could possibly be, and they actually were able to make a mark. It was pretty amazing. And I look at the guy Cam, and I just think, what a successful career Marty Friedman's had. But that being said,
in Japan,
even in the United States, when he was in Megadeth, Megadeth's
I don't mean that as a knock. I mean that as my deep and abiding love for popular music in Japan.
That's
so
hard
full
to argue
disclosure.
That's hard to argue with that for sure. But I mean, Kirk Hammett's the guy that when people think of the great thrash metal guitar player, especially people who aren't players, like when they just think, the greatest guitar player. And there's a couple other guys on our overrated list that I think are in that same kind of world.
I mean, dude, how many times have you transcribed the solo from Enter Sandman?
Oh, yeah. For me, it's Master Puppets. I've had to do that a million times.
Oh, dude, lately we've had a run on Master Puppets. Exactly. Oh, my goodness.
For pop culture reasons. Yeah.
Which is, you know what? Right on.
Yeah, I'd rather that than the alternative.
Yeah.
Here's this new Demi Lovato song I got to transcribe.
Well, and you know what, man? How many of those Demi Lovato fans are listening to Kate Bush now?
Yeah, and Metallica.
Is awesome.
Yeah. I had a little girl who's like maybe 10 years old who came in and demanded I teach her how to play Master of Puppets. 10-year-old girl with an acoustic guitar. I'm like, that is awesome.
There's hope for humankind.
All right, so let's get into some underrated guitar players, and I'll throw a couple out there.
Okay.
And
I've got one.
Okay, go ahead and do yours first. Yeah.
And this will also like roll into a previous podcast we did about some of the bands that should have been bigger, but because of the change in radio format.
Yeah.
Andy Timmons.
Oh yeah, Andy Timmons is a great guitar player.
So great.
Yep. If everybody probably knows him now as this sort of solo artist, a bit, and he's also the musical director for Olivia Newton-John. A lot of people didn't know that.
What a great vocalist, man! Oh my goodness.
But he also, of course, made his bones with Danger back in the day, and that's a band that was another underrated band that kind of got thrown out with the bathwater during the grunge apocalypse.
Right. Yeah. They did. Yep. But when it became naughty to listen to them.
Yeah. Exactly. It wasn't even a bang bang. So, but I'll say this. Andy is a guy who can do it all. I mean, he could literally do anything. And I think what's funny is in the people in the know Andy Timmons is legit, but it's just the people who are like casual music fans don't know who the guy is.
Isn't he also a pretty prolific session guy?
He does some sessions. I mean, there's not a whole lot of session work to be done anymore. I mean, there's only a handful of dudes who do it.
Ooh, I've got another one, but go ahead.
I mean that. Okay, well, my next guy that I would say is underrated, which is amazing because some people can argue he's not, is Jake E. Lee. I think Jake E. Lee is a guy who, obviously with Ozzy got very famous very quick, but I still think he's underrated. His stuff, I
agree.
For some reason, it's always Randy or then it's Zach. He kind of gets lost in the shuffle in between.
Yeah, I mean, Zach has been on their longest, and so that's going to have an effect. And I like Zach a lot. I love Zach. Dude, Zach Wild's a Ronnie Letecro disciple.
Yeah, well, it's funny, though, is Zach's got a little bit of Billy Gibbons in him, too.
Yeah,
which is kind of interesting. He's got that kind of mix. But with Jake, though, I mean, he's talking about such a unique player and a guy who can do everything, but has such a unique stamp in the way he plays. Is so personal. He's got such attitude in his riffs. I listen to like something like Ball and Chain from Badlands.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just so meaty and just killer. And even the stuff with Red Dragon Cartel he did recently, he's got a lot of there's a lot of really cool harmonic stuff going on, killer solos, attitude, vibe.
Dude, anytime I write a staccato lick, I'm thinking I've got Jake E. Lee brain.
Yeah, he's a guy that deserves to be a lot more venerated than he is. I think he needs to be right in that conversation with Randy as like the greatest Aussie guitar player. I love Zach too. I'm in the same. I think all three of those guitar players really added a lot to the Ozzy Osbourne sauce.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I think all
Agreed.
three of them made great. It's funny. It almost seems like they all made two great records. Like obviously Randy only made two records because he got in that horrible accident.
Right.
But then Jake made two great records. Zach made two great records, and then a bunch of okay records after that.
Yep.
But they all had two great Aussie records in them. You know what I mean?
That's right.
I still kind of lament for the Joe Holmes record that we never got.
Right. And I also lament that the Gus G era wasn't,
I love Gus G too.
I love Gus, right? I don't know who was writing the songs.
They wouldn't let him write.
Exactly. Yep, that makes perfect
I think there's
sense.
a lot of the purse strings. They didn't want to have to share publishing with anybody, so they weren't going to accept any of that. So they're going to have their guy write the songs,
produced.
And I think that those albums really suffered for that because I think what made those other, obviously the great Aussie records, great is that the guitar player brought that in. I think that they kind of got to this point where they didn't want to share. They said, okay, this is our thing, not your thing.
Yeah.
And that's the end product suffered. Exactly.
Yep.
I mean, I love Ozzy, but I mean,
those
to me, that Jake is the guy that is the most forgotten in that group. And even a band like Badlands, as great as they were, people don't. I mean, there's a handful of us who know about that band, but that band was amazing.
Well, there's problems with who owns the rights to those. That's why the albums are not in print, but unavailable via legal streaming outlets. So there's a reason why. Yeah.
All right. So we did my underrated. Who's your next underrated guy?
Blues Saraceno.
Oh, blues. Guitar for the
man.
Practicing Musician Records was his first record.
Yeah, man, totally, dude. And from what I understand, he does a lot of session work.
Yeah.
A la Tedesco, a la Lukather.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure if you heard guitar in like a Wheaties commercial or something these days.
Or like on Hey Jesse on the Disney Channel or something like that, yeah.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, I'm going to guess that's because there's some guitar and that kind of stuff.
So the audience should know that Scott has kids.
Yes, I do.
They're awesome. I don't, and that's awesome too.
That's true. It's cool with being a parent, and it's cool to not be a parent.
That's right. That's right. So
Brian should say that he knows of. No,
yeah.
Yeah, I like blues a lot too. I mean, I remember he had that really interesting like plaid guitar that he played back in the day.
Yeah, with like the that special pickup.
Yep.
What were they? It wasn't Hot Rails. It was the
Wasn't
Trembucker.
Oh yeah. I remember that. Yeah, great guitar. I mean, what's so funny back then is that all these great guitar players are coming out of the woodwork. It was really hard to keep up. You turn around and say, "Oh my God, who's this guy? Blues Saraceno, what's this about?" And you check out the music and you're like, holy crap, this guy's amazing.
And you know what? Like, I think one of our previous podcasts, we talked about how there was an era when your abilities as a guitar player had to be so far beyond what was necessary for your gig to even have that gig.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Blues Saraceno was the third guitar player in Poison after Richie Kotzen.
Yeah.
Poison.
Yeah, to try and match up to CC DeVille.
And you know what? CC wasn't a bad player, man. He also contributed some solo work to some other albums of the time.
Yeah, I mean, if you consider, like, especially compared to now, CC DeVille was a very good guitar player back in the day. He was a very good guitar player in the 80s, but he was he wasn't like on the George Lynch, Eddie Van Halen level or something
maybe
like that.
we should put CC on the underrated list, because he definitely, if we're, grading this on public perception, like, he really does get, like,
but he got
ripped.
so much crap from guitar players. I mean, I guess that's true.
What I mean.
Yeah.
He got ripped, I think, kind of unfairly.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a response to Poison's kind of image. I think was a big part of that more than the playing necessarily.
Yeah, there were the issues with the MTV performance where they were, he started the wrong song, but there was a backing track, and all that stuff.
Yeah, and that stuff lives forever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. And then there was the heroin addiction, and all that stuff.
I got nothing negative to say about CC DeVille.
Yeah, dude, nothing, man. I think he's very underrated.
Yeah, I agree. So, we're going on overrated guitar player again.
Are we back? Yeah, go ahead and hit me with a...
Let's do like one more overrated each.
We just did two underrateds, I think, CC and Blues.
So let's do one more overrated each, and then we'll do a bunch of underrated, because I got a bunch of them. So I think the next guy that I would describe as like one of the most overrated guitar players ever, 100% sure, this is going to sound bad, Jimmy Page. I really think he is one of the most overrated guitar players.
Okay, now remember, so we have to define overrated again. It doesn't mean that we think this person sucks.
No, of course not. Jimmy Page is great.
He's legendary.
Yes,
right?
but I think
legendary.
The chasm between, particularly his live performance playing and his legend, is pretty far. Especially if you consider that time period. You look at a guy like Hendrix or Clapton. They were much more on top of their playing, particularly live, than Page was.
Okay, so this is a controversial opinion, but Hendrix was sloppy.
Yeah, for sure. But so Page was like beyond sloppy. He was like,
I think Hendrix was sloppier than Page.
Wow, that's to be debated there, but
it's okay. Well, and there's the other man. Like, so if we just focus on Jimmy Page, since I think you and I come from a perspective of desiring a certain level of virtuosity.
Yeah.
Right. Melodically, compositionally, I mean, total virtuosity there, and. Put that in the era, right? He was doing his thing before there was an Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah.
He was probably playing 11 gauge strings on that Les Paul, right?
I just look at the chasm between like someone like Jeff Beck, who's his contemporary, and
Jeff Beck.
And I look at like, okay, how if you walk down the street and talk to 10 people randomly, how many of them have heard of Jimmy Page? Probably a lot. How many people have heard of Jeff Beck? Not as many.
Yeah,
and I look at that chasm between like a guy like Jeff Beck and Page, and it's like, I don't understand why Page is venerated so much and Beck's this like obscure figure. And I mean, Hendrix obviously I think is as much famous, and as much as his playing is amazing, and at the time especially, and deserves all the respect. I think Hendrix's playing deserves every bit of respect. I really think Hendrix is an icon more for his image and his performances than he is for maybe his playing.
Yeah, and the intersection of technology, time period, right? All of that stuff, right? So as we know. As we know, as it pertains to music and music theory and everything, context is everything.
It's true. And it's not to say that Page wasn't great, and I love the Zeppelin records like everybody else does, but I look at like it's not even. I'm not saying he's not a good player. I'm just saying like his level of fame relative to his talent level it seems sort of.
I mean, when you're watching and hearing him play the solos on The Song Remains the Same, I mean, yeah, man. I mean, like the pick isn't getting to the string party at the same time. Yeah, you know, it's a little late.
And I remember the Celebration Day performance they did at, like, maybe was it 2007? I want to say, or 2008, the most recent one. I really got the impression watching him play, it's like, you know, everybody here should just be really happy they're in the same room as Jimmy Page.
And they should.
And they should, but like I didn't get the impression like I'm going to really lay it down, man. I'm going to really come in and play. It was just sort of like, I'm Jimmy Page and you should all just be happy I'm here and take whatever I put out there. And I look at that and I compare that to Beck. I'm like, dude, Beck never takes a night off.
Yeah, he never phones it in.
He always gives everything he's got. And I just look at that and there's no excuse.
And I guess he's like on the new Ozzy single?
Yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah, he plays with all kinds of different people now, actually.
Yeah, I haven't heard it yet. And you know, much as I love Jeff Beck, I have this weird, like, I don't know. I feel like maybe Ozzy and Jeff Beck are two great flavors that I don't expect to taste great together.
Kind of like pickles and like chocolate ice cream or something.
Like, why didn't they just call Gus G in for the session work?
Yeah, I don't know. Why didn't they just have Zach do the whole thing?
Right.
That doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Dude, why, you know what? Make nice with Jake.
Yeah, or Joe.
Yeah,
bring Joe Holmes
totally.
in.
Joe Holmes in.
Yeah, speaking of Joe Holmes, that's going to be my next guy on the segue.
Dude,
underrated guitar players. Joe Holmes, who of course played with David Lee Roth, actually on the Little Ain't Enough tour. He replaced Jason Becker, who of course wasn't able to play because of his ALS,
right?
And played amazingly. And then after that, he played with Ozzy on I think the Down to Earth and Osmosis tours.
Yes.
And he actually wrote a couple of tunes on Down to Earth. A few years ago, put out a record called Pharmakos, which is incredible. It's some of the best music I have heard from an artist in the last like 15 years. And he just recently dropped some new stuff. He's getting ready to drop another record out soon. And the guy is just, it's a shame to me that he's not as well known as those other Ozzy guitar players, because it's like, that dude was incredible. He could do all the Jason Becker stuff.
He was a Randy Rhoads student. He was one of Randy's students.
Literally took lessons from Randy Rhoads.
That's right.
But he sounds like his own guy, too. It's not like he's a Rhoads clone or something.
Oh, totally.
And I look at that and I think, man, what a shame that this dude is not more well known. You know, and it's
talk about underrated guitar players. I'll link that to an underrated band, Lizzie Borden.
Yeah, who Joe Holmes also played with.
Right, dude. Visual Lies. That's a great album, man.
That's a band that's...
Lizzie Borden, what a great voice, dude.
It's amazing to me that band didn't hit bigger. You know,
I'm telling you, man, how come Lizzie Borden and King Diamond can't go on tour together?
I mean, it should happen.
Dude, it should happen.
Yeah, it's
dude,
true.
like Lizzie Borden, King Diamond duet with like Joe Holmes and Andy LaRocque.
Oh,
okay,
that's amazing.
Yeah, if the guitar gods are listening, like, please make that happen.
You need to start becoming a booking agent, man.
Right?
You got to make that happen.
I go to the Doc McGee School of Band Management and Promotion or something. Yeah.
Well, I think that's true. I definitely agree with that. That's a very underrated band for sure. You know what I mean?
So underrated.
So let's think about an underrated guitar player. I got a whole bunch. If you don't have any,
Andy LaRocque.
Oh, speaking of which,
dude, Andy, man, you know what? Like, if you're gonna go to vibrato school, you know those
Whammy
courses.
Bar school too.
Yeah, dude, and you know what? I mean, like, along with John Sykes, I don't know. I can only speak for myself personally, but if there's any guitar hero that I've tried to model myself after, it's Andy LaRocque.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's in there. It's in your DNA. I can hear it.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, we've played together for a while now. Yeah. I hope you can hear it.
I definitely. Oh, for sure. You can always tell.
I'm so fishing for compliments
now. When Ryan's solo comes up, I can always. But it's funny. It doesn't sound like it's not like you're aping Andy LaRocque. It's just you've got those elements in there. You know what I mean? It's just part of who you are. It's almost like you and your parents. Like, there's little tics that you probably have that you got directly from watching your parents when you were a child. And you don't even know they're there. They're just a part of your DNA.
Oh, yeah. You know, a couple years ago, like, I was actually, I was actually listening to, God, who's the guy from Chicago?
Jim McMahon, the quarterback for the Bears. Sammy Sosa, famous home run slugger for the Cubs.
No, it's not. He's the dude that did all the love ballads and stuff.
Oh, Peter Cetera.
Yeah, man. Okay. Like, I was actually listening to a couple of Peter Cetera songs after watching that Chicago documentary on
Man,
Netflix.
How did I miss Michael Jordan? I'm thinking about Chicago sports icons, and I get Sammy Sosa before Michael Jordan. Sorry about that, everybody.
Well,
Jim McMahon and Sammy Sosa.
Dude, you said Jim McMahon. I thought you were talking about professional wrestling.
No, that's Vince McMahon.
Oh, got it. It's the monosyllabic first name.
So funny.
But dude, I just remember like sitting in the recliner in the house, like at 5:30 in the morning, because I'm old now.
Yeah.
Like listening to Peter Cetera songs. I used to hate it when they came on when I was in the back of my dad's station wagon, just going, oh shit, these are really great songs.
Yeah.
I'm becoming my dad. As long as I never start golfing.
That's true. Just don't golf. That's for sure.
Thanks for listening to the Rock Guitar Confidential podcast with Scott and Ryan. Are you pissed off yet? Are you not pissed off? Either way, please make sure to like and subscribe. Now back to the show.
But yeah, you're absolutely.
Andy LaRocque, man.
Andy LaRocque is an amazing guitar player. Let me throw my next one out there. Ronnie Laticro.
Yes.
From TNT. I think that guy is the whole package. He's got amazing solos. I mean, if you listen to the Tell No Tales album, and then obviously I think that one and Intuition are also great. And of course, Knights of the New Thunder.
And Seven Seas is one of my favorite songs
just
ever.
Incredible riffs, incredible. And you paired that kind of guitar talent with a guy like Tony Harnell on vocals.
Yeah, man.
And it's just like amazing. That band, why they didn't own MTV, I will never understand. They had the songs, they had the players, they had the look, they had the great vocalist, they had the amazing guitar player. I don't get it. I think his playing has been really influential on me, especially in the riff department. But even on the solos, his picking technique is so flawless.
The tone. I mean, and you know what? There's something in there for everyone to like. I mean, like, for example, Jack White would love to play any of Ronnie Laticro's guitars because they all had super high action.
Oh, yeah. But that's why he hit it so hard, though. I think that's why he played so hard. And he had, for a Norwegian guy, he had the amazing, like, funky like riffs going on. It's incredible. I didn't hear any other guitar players from that part of the world. Like John Norum, as much as I love John Norum, was
underrated,
but he wasn't playing
player.
riffs like Ronnie, though. You know what I mean? Like Ronnie's got like this kind of like swing thing happening, which is like amazing for some guy from Norway. I'm like, how did that happen?
I was reading an article. I think it was like a Zakk Wylde interview or something, and he was talking about how when he was recording No Rest for the Wicked, he told the producer to listen to 10,000 Lovers by TNT, right?
Yeah.
Now, to get his tone. Now, if you listen to that and a song like Miracle Man.
Yep. Yeah.
It's there.
They found it. I mean, his tone was amazing. I mean, that's a guy... I really wish TNT was able to keep it together over the last like 10 years. So they had a kind of a comeback in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. They put like 3 or 4 really strong records out, and I remember thinking, okay, this should be bigger than it is.
And that was with different singers, right?
No, that was with Tony. They did an album called My Religion, and then they had one called All the Way to the Sun, which were both with Tony. Killer records. And then they did one not so great record with a new singer, and then one really great record with a new singer, and then Tony came back in after that, and then it's been out again and back in and back out again. I'm not sure what's going on there, but I just wish that a band like that would be able to keep it together more, as that's a dude who needs to be heard. And the fact that only us guitar players that caught the tail end of the late 80s, early 90s ever heard like maybe Intuition on MTV. Right. And then you dig a little deeper and you start finding Seven Seas.
I love the scene in the video for Intuition with like I don't know what European city they're in, but there's like a dude just like in the crowd juggling. And I was thinking, man, that's a place I'd like to be, where people are so happy there's like even like a juggling dude Ronnie just like in the crowd.
He to me is the king of the underrated guitar players in a lot of respects. I got like 5 more, but go ahead and
dude, no doubt. I'll throw another underrated one out there, and I'm gonna go Kristen Pelletieri.
Oh yeah, Kristen Pelletieri is definitely underrated for sure,
dude. Like, I mean, not just the neoclassical chops, but I mean, going back through his catalog, like the tone and the production on his albums, like some of the stuff he was doing with. Either he's drop tuning or he's playing or he's creating 7-string riffs. I mean, just man.
Yeah, I mean, he's fierce as a rhythm player, and he's got flawless chops as a lead player. It's just,
right.
I mean, I think his big kind of thing that people would slag him on when he first came out was it's kind of like an Yngwie clone sort of thing. But there's a
lot of those.
Yeah, exactly. But then he evolved too. It wasn't like he just stayed there. You know what I mean?
Well, and to be fair, Yngwie is also a clone
because
it's classical music. It's centuries old.
Richie Blackmore clone too.
And I love Richie Blackmore.
Yeah. Oh, great. I mean, I can't slag Ricky Blackmore. He's a guy that's not overrated. He's very much...
He's probably like just right rated.
Yeah, exactly. He's properly rated.
He's in like the Goldilocks zone of ratedness.
Yeah, but in Pelletieri, I agree with that. And he's a guy that, he did some really strong stuff. And it's all over the map. He's got stuff he did with Graham Bonnet. He did stuff with all these different singers. And his new stuff's pretty great, too. I mean, it's
so great.
It's amazing that he's not there was a moment there in the early 90s where I thought he was going to be the next Yngwie. And then, the grunge apocalypse happened, and that was...
This is so listeners out there, this is obviously a theme that's going to be continuing to pop up, but you know what? It's a huge part of our experience in the music world and, you know, on our way to becoming music professionals.
And I got to believe that the dinosaurs would have something to say about the asteroid, too, after the asteroid. You know what I mean? They survived. Like, yeah, that wasn't good times. That was pretty bad, you know?
So, you know, maybe in the future someone's going to, like... you know, find like Jakey Lee's DNA frozen in amber.
Yes, and they'll recreate him again.
Yes, right, in a laboratory.
So my next underrated guy is going to be Chris Oliva, who from the band Savatage, who obviously, you know, if you're a fan of Savatage, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not, he's a guy that made about 6 or 7 great records, starting in the mid-early 80s all the way through the early 90s. He unfortunately died in the early 90s in a car crash. But not after making an amazing record called Edge of Thorns that was incredible. It might have been the best thing they ever put out on that. And the guy had it all, man. He had the fierce riffs, incredible tone, could play leads that were both you know, technically amazing and had a lot of passion, fit the music. You know, he wrote incredible, you know, kind of sort of evocative, you know, chord sequences, and just when he needed to just go for the jugular with the riffs, he had it. You know, tone was unbelievable. You know, I think that guy, the fact that he's not more revered. I mean, thankfully, you know, Trans-Siberian Orchestra is still going strong. But that keeps his legacy alive a bit. But it's like that's a guy that people should know.
Right. Well, I mean, again, you just nailed it. I mean, how many millions of people? I mean, Trans-Siberian Orchestra is beloved.
And everybody should just know this: that Trans-Siberian Orchestra is Savatage. Savatage is Trans-Siberian Orchestra. It's the same band.
Savatage playing Christmas songs.
Yeah, exactly. But it happened in the early '90s as they put out a record called Dead Winter Dead. That they had a song called Christmas Eve Sarajevo on that, and no records or no radio stations would play it, even though it was a Christmas tune, because it was for the band Savatage. They took a year off, rebranded themselves as the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, put the same tune out, and it became a monster smash hit, and they became a multi-platinum, you know, artist after that, and started touring the country with 2 different troops every single Christmas season. It's one of the highest grossing tours that there is, and that is Savatage. They just rebranded themselves to Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
Yeah, great. And you know what? Going on the underrated guitar players list, I'm going to throw Al Pitrelli in there.
Also of Savatage and Alice Cooper fame. Yeah.
Yep, and Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
well, to me, in my head, I just think of the Savatage and they're the same thing.
Do you listen to Poison by Alice Cooper? I mean, he's such a smooth guitar player.
Listen to Undertour off of the Wake of Magellan album from Savatage.
Yeah, man.
Him and Chris Cafferty are just going to town.
Wait, are you talking Chris Oliva or Al Pitrelli?
Al Pitrelli.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, the Wake of Magellan is Al Pitrelli. The 2 guitar after Edge of Thorns, they put out an album called Handful of Rain, which was John Oliva, his brother, on all the rhythm guitars, and Alex Skolnick on lead guitar.
Oh, wow.
And after that, they went and they did Dead Winter Dead, and their lineup was Al Pitrelli and Chris Cafferty.
All right.
And Chris Cafferty was the second guitar player back when Chris was in the band, too. So he was legit. He was like an OG guy.
Nice.
And so that was, and obviously Al Pitrelli's freaking the man.
You know, one thing I'll say about Al Pitrelli, and you know, it seems that more and more whenever I compliment a guitar player, I describe them as being smooth.
Yeah.
He's such a smooth player.
Yeah,
man.
he's just a pro. He's a pro's pro. That's what when I think of Pitrelli, that's what I think of. He's a guy that can do it all. You know.
Absolutely.
And that's another Savatage alum, which really makes me very happy to hear you say that. That's awesome,
dude. Without a doubt, man. I'd throw Joel Hoekstra in that bucket too.
Yeah, definitely of the modern guys for sure.
Doug Aldrich.
Doug Aldrich too. Both
hugely underrated. Yeah, absolutely, man. I will never forget being in the movie theater in 1986 to see the Transformers animated movie.
Yeah, you're talking about with Lion, right?
Yeah, dude. Transformer theme by Lion, dude. Yeah. So I would have been 8 years old in 1986. Blew my mind. I watched and Transformers, of course, were one of my favorite things ever at that time.
Yeah. Because you're a kid in the 80s.
Yeah, dude. And I distinctly remember just like wishing that song would play again in the movie. Like I couldn't figure out why. Like, I mean, they did You Got the Touch.
Well, while we're on that subject of Whitesnake guitar players, I have to go with Red Beach, who's one of my top 5 favorite guitar players ever.
Yep.
And a guy who should be venerated in the same sentence as guys like Satriani and Vai and people in that George Lynch.
And also a very smooth guitar player, and also very fluid,
versatile guitar player. Do a lot of things too, and his playing's incredible. It's got all these layers to it. You know, I mean, that's a guy that, you know, as much shit as Winger got, back in the day, like nobody could legitimately ever say anything about the chops of that band.
Dude, if nobody if Winger was like the band Ghost, where like nobody knew who the musicians were, if they were all just like nameless ghoul number 1 and number 2,
exactly,
then like what could you say then?
Yeah, I think we talked about this in the previous podcast, but like that band just got labeled and like seen as like the antichrist amongst all the people who hated 80s music.
Yeah, because of their image and being good at music.
Everybody in that band's amazing at what they do.
Yep.
And it's like, and they wrote great songs and played great on those songs.
Yep.
Like if you don't like that, I don't know what to say to you.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That's
totally.
Reb is one of my all-time favorite guitar players for sure.
You know what I like about Reb Beach? He looks happy when he's playing.
Because he is. Yep. He loves playing.
That's totally. He's never like, he actually isn't afraid to smile while he's on stage, and I really appreciate that.
Okay, I got 4 more underrated guys. Do you have any other ones?
Let's wait. 4 more under or over?
I don't have any more overrated. I want to live in a positive world.
Yeah, I'm kind of enjoying this underrated conversation. See that? See how that goes?
Well, okay, I'll throw another one out there. The next one I want to mention is Jason Bieler, who's the guitar player from Saigon Kick.
Oh, okay.
That is a dude who had the goods. That guy could play. Oh my God! To me, he reminds me a lot of, because he came out and was kind of a contemporary of Nuno Betancourt. And I love Nuno. I'm not trying to take anything away from Nuno Betancourt. I think he's an amazing guitar player too.
Yeah.
But Jason is just as good a guitar player as him, and he did not get anywhere near the love in the guitar magazines or any of that stuff at the time. And I think part of the reason why is like Extreme. Saigon Kick is one of those bands who kind of didn't really fit neatly into a box. They got like Extreme. They got famous for an acoustic ballad that was really nothing like with the rest of their music, and they'd have a song that was like a pseudo like thrash industrial song next to like a pop rock song, next to like a hard rock kind of classic hard rock song, next to an acoustic ballad. They were that kind of band who you couldn't put in a box so much. But his solos were legit. His riffs are legit, especially on the first, on the Lizard and on the first Saigon Kick records. Riffage, solos, the whole thing. And those guys are just one of those bands that just came out at the wrong time. This came out like 3-4 years too late. If they'd been there a little earlier, they might have had a couple more years to build on the success of their hit song and so on. But to me, Jason Bieler is a guy who more people should know about, for sure. Do you have any other underrated guys?
Well, I mean, right now I'm thinking about Devin Townsend.
Yeah, but people think of Devin Townsend as a vocalist, though, really.
Well, also guitarist, producer.
Totally,
so maybe he's not quite
people in
exactly
the know,
right guy, but he's definitely one of those. Hey, I've got this cool artist in my pocket.
Yeah, and he can do all kinds of stuff. He's
versatile.
A strapping young lad.
Yes, and Sex and Religion, which is actually my favorite Steve Vai album.
That's actually pretty controversial.
It's very controversial, but
most people go Passion and Warfare.
Yeah, but I mean, I want songs.
All right, I will let that go. One of these days, we'll have a whole throwdown about that.
Okay.
All right, so the next guy I would say is underrated. Is someone that probably a lot of people don't know, and that's Harry Cody. Harry Cody is the guitar player from the band called Shotgun Messiah.
Oh, yeah, Shotgun Messiah.
And that guy, they put out 3 really killer records, and it was all the same thing. Came out like 89, 90, 92. I think it was the last one that kind of put out.
Was that Heartbreak Boulevard?
That was the second record, yeah.
Heartbreak Boulevard.
But the solos were just unbelievable. I mean, he's one of those guys that kind of really, to my mind, encapsulated all the greatness of the 80s in one player. Like he had elements of Vai, he had elements of Eddie, he had elements of like, Satriani. He had like a little bit of everything, and he was kind of like a crystallization of that. Plus, great songs and riffing. Really, that's a band that, again, I think they were partially kind of too all over the map to really put into a box, so it was hard to market those guys. And there wasn't like a pinup model for like the lead singer kind of thing, so they kind of fell through the cracks. But the guitar playing is like unassailable, and I really hope that Harry Cody's out there still playing in some capacity, because that guy was too damn talented.
Yeah, hell yeah, man. Hopefully he didn't, meet an untoward fate.
I don't know. I hope he's good, because I always look at those records and I think, man, this guy was great.
Yeah.
And so,
and I mean, it must have been, you know what, that's another, not to go dark, but I mean, that's definitely some fallout from that change in popular music formats.
Yep.
A lot of talented people couldn't cope.
Yeah. Or just they end up, hey, I'm going to go be an accountant now, because I can't do this. And there's no
or I'm Vito Bratta and I'm going to retire. Also on the underrated list.
One of the most underrated guitar players, because he's a guy that should be in that conversation with Lynch and with like Yngwie and Vai and those guys.
Yeah.
And I think now, strangely enough, I feel like people are starting to talk about Vito again.
Yeah, there's a recent Guitar World article, and I think, man, that made me feel good to see that his name's getting back.
I remember
out there.
hearing the Wait solo and just thinking, who is this guy? That would happen all the time in the late 80s, early 90s, by the way. You hear some new band, like, who is this guy?
Right.
Holy crap, this guy's amazing. You know what I mean? And Vito is that guy. And I've heard, I remember the one that blew my mind the most was The Little Fighter, the riffs and the solo of that song. I was like, holy crap, this guy's got it all.
So now, who was the dude in XYZ?
Okay, that's another guy I want to talk about. That's Mark Diglio.
All right.
And Mark Diglio, his tone was so killer.
So good.
And
like, listen, like Inside Out is a great sound.
Oh, listen to Face Down in the Gutter. Yeah. Listen to What Keeps Me Loving You. That's another song that's got incredible. I remember watching that solo. I had it on MTV video. I remember watching that over and over again and watching this solo. And like, that guy's solo is incredible. And I couldn't believe his touch and his attack with the, he's a guy that's, to me, I don't understand why, because I never even back in the day read articles about that guy. It seems kind of weird to me that a guy as good as that was sort of like just, whatever. Then no one really talked about that. I mean, I knew, and I still listen to XYZ all the time.
Yeah,
and I
think
absolutely. I think that band was extremely underrated, and that guitar player, it was laughably underrated.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So, I got a couple more. But do you have any other underrated guys?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've got the grand finale topic like all loaded up and ready to go. So
let me get my last couple out of the way.
Yeah, so go ahead and let's hit me with those, and then
Okay, now another guy that I want to talk about is underrated is Jeff Tyson, and Jeff Tyson is a guitar player from the band T-Ride. And that's a band that came out in like 92, I want to say.
Yeah, you've got me on this one, man. My knowledge is pretty encyclopedic of artists from this era.
Well, they only put out one record.
T-Ride.
They came out just a little too late. They came out in the wake of, I think, Satriani just put out The Extremist, and he was really pumping this new band, T-Ride, because one of his students was the guitar player in that band. Some of the best rhythm guitar and vocals I've ever heard on a rock record ever. They only put out one record.
So that's T, just the letter T.
T-Ride.
Got it.
And he had a few solos on that thing that are just unbelievable. It was one of those things, though. It's almost like looking at the sun. Like you just get a sense of it, and it's gone. That same sort of thing as this solo would go by, and like, what the hell was that? And you just knew if this guy could like give himself a solid, half a, say 30 bars in a song, he could just do some amazing things. And I thought it was genius in the sense that it didn't give you too much. It just gave you enough to let you know what's there.
Yeah.
And that's another band kind of similar to Shotgun Messiah, in the sense that I think that they came out just a little too late.
And here's what's a shame is that this is right in my this is right the kind of music that I eat, sleep, and breathe, and I have no idea about T-Ride. I should know about T-Ride.
Yeah,
I should know about T-Ride.
Well,
and I don't because
yeah, because you can't be aware of everything.
Cultural shifts and evil record companies. And apply it. Okay.
All right. Last guy I'll mention. I could go on all day. I'll spare you listeners this, but last guy I want to mention is Greg Howe. Greg Howe from Shrapnel Records.
So good.
Howe 2 is the band he did with his brother Al. And I'm not as into the fusion stuff. He kind of in the late 90s, early 2000s kind of made a move to be more of like a sort of a fusion player in the sort of the Return to Forever sort of mold. He didn't have the rock thing, but on his first record, his first instrumental record, and then his 2 albums he did with his band with his brother Howe 2, I thought his playing was brilliant. It had a swing to it. It had like this vibiness to it. It had like this. His tone was very sinewy. It had like a lot of sort of give in it. It wasn't like a bright kind of strident tone. It was a very kind of smooth kind of tone. His playing all together. And he did a couple records with Richie Kotzen where it was just him and Richie Kotzen.
Oh, nice.
That were incredible. So that's it. But he's a guy you don't hear a lot about. People talking about how great Greg Howe was. And I think Greg Howe, and still is, Greg Howe's an amazing guitar player.
Yeah, so I think he has a signature model with Kiesel guitars now.
Yeah, I think
that's cool
right.
that he's getting some love there.
And he had a band called Marigold for a while with a female vocalist and stuff like that. And he's kind of done stuff that's all over the map. His solo stuff has gotten much more fusiony, which I don't appreciate as much. I would have rather him stick with the rock sort of thing. But
that's how I feel about Al Di Meola.
Al Di Meola is kind of a guy that's always kind of straddled the line between like rock and jazz, you know what I mean? I'm sure in his mind he's playing jazz.
Oh, the first few albums though, oh man, Les Paul into Marshall doing what he was doing,
and the chops he had.
We'll have to do a whole episode all just about like the influences of our influences.
Yeah, that's true. Going like our musical grandparents is what I like to call those people.
Yeah, dude, definitely. Sure.
All right, what was your grand finale? Let's get to that.
Well, okay, I'm also gonna submit for evaluation Gary Hoey.
Gary Hoey's great. Yeah.
That Heavy Bones album, man,
with Frankie Banali on drums, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And like just like kind of the wrong time, but also forged a name for himself playing Linus and Lucy.
Yeah, I actually really thought that In the Summer 2 soundtrack was pretty great.
Yeah,
really, really cool instrumental music. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, dude,
sure.
Absolutely.
Great guitar player. I think probably underrated. I would agree with that. Although he's got a career going now as a producer. He's done like the last couple Lita Ford records as a producer and stuff, which is kind of cool. So
awesome.
I love Gary. His tone, especially back in those days.
Ooh, okay. So here's a controversial one.
Is this underrated or overrated?
Oh man, I don't know. We're gonna have to throw that one out to the. It's times like this that like I wish we like could take calls from the audience. So I wasn't thinking about bringing this up, and we have to completely divorce like anything we know about the personality. Oh well, actually, you know what? I've got two that are kind of related, so I'm going to go on a little tangent. Okay. The first is Vinnie Vincent.
That's not controversial. I mean, this is awesome. I mean, look at the Invasion records, especially.
Those Invasion records are great. Yeah. Like Vinny was kind of. I mean, I get the criticisms about some of his leads being kind of like swarm of bumblebees.
Yeah. That might be as much about his tone as his playing too. Really.
Yeah, but man, he's such a good songwriter.
Yep.
Such a good songwriter, man. Back on the Streets and. Any number of great Kiss, like the whole Kiss Revenge album, the songs are really good.
Yeah.
So I got to give him a shout out, but this will lead to a truly underrated guitar player, Tim Kelly from Slaughter.
Yeah, I agree with that. He's a guy that not a lot of people even know about. You know what I mean?
Who's also sadly no longer with us.
Yep. Same sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, wrote some great solos to some really good songs back in the day, and was the consummate pro.
Yeah,
back in the day,
dude, absolutely.
For sure. Now, I think we talked earlier about a guy that we think is the most appropriately rated guitarist of all time, which is Slash.
Well, okay, so I'm going to say, this is the grand finale submission. Like, I mean, you can't work, as a guitar instructor or in the music industry without, we have to talk about Slash.
Guitar hero Slash.
So, right. So I'm going to submit that Slash is unique because he is both simultaneously overrated and underrated.
How so? Do tell.
Okay, so by the general public that only knows his work with Guns N' Roses, I'm going to say overrated.
Meaning the image they have in their head of this amazing guitar hero doesn't really match the reality.
Well, I mean, if all you've got to go on is Sweet Child of Mine, which is a song that I don't dislike, but like I really don't ever need to hear it again.
Yep. Back in Black's like that for me.
Yeah, I love Back in Black, but I don't
need to hear it ever again.
For me, it's You Shook Me All Night by AC/DC. Yeah.
Honestly, there's like 10 AC/DC songs that we probably don't need to hear anymore.
I mean,
not that anything against AC/DC, they're a great band.
No,
those
love
are great
it.
songs.
Such greatness. We could do a whole podcast on AC/DC and what that means, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I could put Angus kind of in a similar.
Yeah, he is kind of similar to Slash in the sense that the image in people's heads, especially if they're not musicians, is that he's like the ultimate guitar hero.
Yeah.
I've heard people with straight faces say, who's better, Eddie Van Halen or Angus Young?
Oh, yeah.
And I go like, well, okay, I'm not going to take anything away from anybody, but
man,
it's laughable to even ask that question. But
right. I mean, there's so much that I love about Angus, and I mean, look, there's a lot to love about Slash, but like if we're like solo from Sweet Child of Mine, I mean, there's the iconic. There's the iconic, arpeggiated intro finger exercise thing from Sweet Child of Mine. Yeah, that's iconic. That's cool. The solo's not real special.
No, but it fits the song. You know what I mean? And
it does. And I mean, at least like it gets kind of harmonic minor-y sometimes.
You know what's
so that's kind of cool.
I would say about Slash's solos in general is I think they're very memorable. That's one thing that I would say. Like, if you were to go out and do, like, let's say a Kristen Pelletieri style solo, it'd be us guitar players going, wow, listen to that. But then, like, the average Joe Schmo on the street who doesn't play guitar, it would just go right over their heads. You know what I mean? And
Yeah, and
that's
that's another.
Yeah.
That's another. You know what? We'll have to. Accessibility. I suppose maybe it should factor in as well.
Well, I also have taught that solo a million times, and I can tell you that I can play the chords and sing the solo.
Yeah,
which is something that's pretty impressive, and I think that's why that's stood the test of time. I'm not to say it's like the greatest guitar player, but I think that's part of why that's so successful.
Yeah, and so it's not. And you know what? Again, I'll give him the Ryan Bowe stamp of approval. Slash is a smooth player, man. Yep. He is smooth, man. He never makes that pentatonic scale sound like he's chopping down a tree.
Yep.
So I got to give him respect for that.
And he plays licks that are like an homage to classic pentatonic licks, but in a way that doesn't sound like he's just regurgitating the same thing from like 1956 again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, like on the same Guns N' Roses album, it is kind of regurgitating the same phrases.
Yeah,
there's a lot of
he
that.
Definitely is.
But that's the Slash of 1987.
He plagiarizes himself all over the place. He has like the same handful of Slashisms.
Slash will use like the blues cliche that like maybe you or I or players like us would maybe like fight to avoid.
Yeah.
He leans into that cliche, and he plays it well. Yeah. Right.
And if it's the music, it's he's always got good tone. You know what I mean? And,
right. So he's actually got a very identifiable tone.
Yeah. And good riff writer too. I think the songwriting's got there's some good riffs. If you look at even the Paradise City verse riff.
Well, you got to give Izzy Stradlin a lot of credit.
For sure.
You know what I
Definitely.
mean? Like when I think of who wrote the songs, I think Izzy. When I think who wrote the solos, and I'm sure it's not like a it's not like a total
messy.
dichotomy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But if you listen to some of the stuff Slash has done on his more recent solo albums, I mean, dude, there's stuff on there where I just think, holy shit, I didn't know he could do that.
Yeah.
And so I got to really get, and so that's where the underrated part comes in, right?
I think the overrated part comes in that he's just such an icon. Like I think it was like a Geico commercial or something with him in it just the other day, and I was like going, wow. I mean, it's not that he doesn't deserve it, but I keep thinking like, wow, so the average person, this is like the ultimate guitar hero in their head. When they close their eyes and actually imagine like who's the Michael Jordan of guitar, they think of Slash, and that's something that's kind of shocking. It's like, oh, okay, I would think these other people, but okay, that's how the average person thinks of it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's kind of crazy. But
so it's an image thing again.
I think it comes down to being an iconic band with iconic songs with an iconic image. You know what I mean? Yep. And it's kind of it's weird to me. You could argue probably with this current generation that Slash is probably more famous as a guitar hero than Eddie Van Halen with the current generation.
Probably more relevant.
Yeah, that's something that, which is to me is complete blasphemy, but that is totally something that I think is true nowadays.
Dude, and that's kind of because like really there's a lot of blues in Eddie's style.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
As much as there's all this other stuff too, but it's like,
right?
It's crazy. So,
totally
all right,
crazy.
I think we've got these guys underrated and overrated. We crushed this one.
Yes, absolutely.
Pat myself on the back.
It's always a pleasure.
It is a pleasure. Thank you so much for listening to Rock Guitar Confidential with Ryan and Scott. We'll have socials up shortly, so you guys can check us out and give us all your amazing comments about how great we are. That's all that happens on social media, right? It's all positivity.
People are just fired up to be encouraging. And,
they want
that's
to
what comments
spread
sections
love,
are for.
So that's what I understand. That's my understanding.
So eventually we'll have a comment section, and we'll all share the love. And
Right.
And in the meantime, if you're interested in guitar lessons in the Sacramento area,
look us up.
Yep,
You got it.
All right. Thanks, you guys.
Bye.
Peace.